A call for legislators to quit and trigger a de facto referendum on political reform. A signature campaign in support of police action against occupiers of roads. And a hatchet attack on police officers in New York.
Good evening. The Hong Kong Federation of Students' Alex Chow has suggested lawmakers resign and trigger a by-election to force a de facto referendum. He calls this a strategy to put pressure on the government to push for a more genuine form of democracy. But a leading figure of a think tank warned this may only weaken the democratic movement.
During its dialogue with the Federation of Students last Tuesday, the government made two suggestions. One is to set up a new multilateral platform for dialogue, and the other is to submit a report to Beijing on the local sentiment since the National People's Congress Standing Committee set a framework for the SAR's political reform at the end of August. The student leaders have agreed that the government's concessions represent half a step to compromise. What about concessions from the students?
Our half step is that you could propose timeline for us to know whether the government has a timetable to endorse civil nomination, to incorporate into the legal system, or to let us know when you will finish the process of eliminating all the functional group.
Acknowledging that the takeover of streets is frustrating members of the public, Chow said the Occupy movement is also considering other strategies to put pressure on the government.
Say different strike from different sectors, and whether those legislative council, those councillors from the legislative council, they would resign for the purpose of having a referendum in Hong Kong. That would be another way for people to voice out their opinion.
Some pan-democratic lawmakers said they have considered the option to resign and trigger a by-election as a way to voice their demand for genuine democracy.
When the timing is right, when we are sure about the effect of such a de facto referendum will serve to enhance and add to the democratic movement, we would not hesitate to participate in one of these referendums.
But New People's Party chairwoman Regina Ip said the de facto referendum triggered in 2010 failed to get public acceptance. She said if it's done again, it would be a clear waste of public funds. Lau Siu Kai, a deputy president of the state-run think tank, said the pan-democratic camp risks a lot if the by-election engages few voters.
If this is a low turnout rate, it will have no effect at all on the political situation. And on the other hand, instead expose the weakness of that democratic movement.
He added that the movement is already losing public support, even though many Hong Kong people are sympathetic to its aspirations. And without mass support, Lau said it would be increasingly hard to force the authorities to make any further concessions.
Occupy protesters are set to take a vote on two motions in the next 2 days. There are concerns raised that these motions, which are meant to be a counter-proposal for the government to consider, may end up further polarizing society.
Protest leader Alex Chow believes Hong Kong needs a citywide vote on political reform at some point in the future. He said the government could use the system set up by the University of Hong Kong to survey views from those in the Occupy movement.
If the government, they have the will to do that, they could also set up a platform for people to vote so as to show that which path Hong Kong people would like to go on and go along so as to dictate about the policy made by the government, especially on the part of constitutional issues.
In the meantime, the movement is holding a vote in the protest areas during the evenings of Sunday and Monday from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. to collect ideas on a counter-proposal for the government to consider. The first motion up for a yes or no or an abstention vote now states that the report by the SAR government to be submitted to Beijing must include a recommendation for the NPC Standing Committee to withdraw the political reform framework it laid down for Hong Kong. And the second motion states that the government's suggested multi-party platform on constitutional development must confirm that functional constituencies will be abolished in the 2016 LegCo election and civil nomination will be included in the 2017 CE election. The strong statements were changed from comparatively mild stances earlier. But Occupy Central organizer Benny Tai disagreed that radical groups have forced in these hardline motions.
I think that is a decision through consensus. People involved in the discussion agree, and that is the consensus we have reached. And the voting process is also a procedure for all the other protesters to indicate their stance on the motions. So I still believe that this is a democratic process we are working on.
But Lau Siu Kai, vice president of a state think tank, raised concerns about the effect on the push for democracy in Hong Kong if the vote results in protesters reinforcing their hardline positions.
They would continue to insist on some radical demands which are not likely to be met by Beijing or by Hong Kong government, create a situation of even further confrontation and polarization between the government on the one hand and the occupation movement on the other.
Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying has brushed aside growing calls for him to step down. The CE said today's resignation will not resolve the ongoing crisis. Leung stressed the importance of the rule of law in trying to resolve the problems facing Hong Kong right now. He urged people to abide by the rule of law, even though they hold different views on political reform. Leung also rejected claims that he's ignoring the voices of poor people and favoring the business sector. He insisted all sectors of society will be given equal opportunities to participate in elections, regardless of their economic contribution.
The Alliance for Peace and Democracy launched a signature campaign today, demanding that occupiers leave the protest areas and reopen the roads to vehicles. Rani Samtani has more.
Demonstrators have been occupying major roads in various districts for almost a month now.
The students are punishing us, the people, trying to get to work. The children trying to get to school. We're being punished. Why punish us? That's not the way to go about it.
This man said he supports the police because the occupation has left Hong Kong in chaos.
Sign your name.
The Alliance for Peace and Democracy launched a new signature campaign today, demanding that Occupy protesters leave the roads so that they can be reopened for public use. Those who want to sign the petition have to show their ID card for authentication at one of the 900-odd stalls set up across Hong Kong. They can also sign the petition online, and the campaign will last until November 2nd. Spokesman Robert Chow said democracy means majority rule. He stressed that if the alliance collects more signatures than the number of participants in the vote to be carried out in the protest areas on Sunday and Monday evenings, the demonstrators will have no grounds to stay.
We are telling them that what do Hong Kong people think? If Hong Kong people say, please use law and order, we want Hong Kong back, then I think the police and the government will know that they have the backing of the people to do whatever they need to do.
The Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong is helping to collect signatures for the campaign. Speaking about clearing out the occupation areas, pro-establishment lawmaker Tam Yu-jung said we should leave it to the professional judgment of the police. He stressed that Occupy demonstrators should consider more rational forms of protests. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Kung Fu Fellows held a rally advocating non-violence.
The group marched from Southorn Playground to the Wan Chai Police Headquarters to call on the police to restore peace in the society, but they stressed they are not against the Occupy movement.
After reaching the police headquarters, the ralliers handed a petition to the police, urging them to carry out their duties impartially. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
A daylight hatchet attack on a group of New York City police officers has been labeled a terrorist attack by investigators. Police say the suspect, who wounded 2 officers before being shot dead, was a reclusive, self-radicalized convert to Islam. The assailant appeared to have acted alone. Surveillance video shows a man with an axe silently charging a group of 4 police officers who were posing for a photo on a busy street in Queens. The suspect has been identified as Zale Thompson, who was shot dead as 2 of the officers drew their weapons. Police say Thompson often ranted online against America and visited websites associated with radical Islamic groups, but had no clear ties to international extremists. Investigators are trying to determine if Thompson had any sort of manifesto.
As of this time, we have not found anything of that nature. This does appear to have been a spontaneous act in the sense of how quickly it occurred, but the fact that he was walking around with that axe in a backpack, the fact that he left someplace with that, would indicate some sense of preparation.
One of the police officers is in hospital in critical but stable condition with head injuries. A female bystander wounded by the gunfire is also in critical condition. Meanwhile, authorities in California have a man in custody after 2 Sacramento County Sheriff's deputies were killed and 2 others wounded in a 6-hour shooting spree. Police say the 34-year-old man was heavily armed.
I think there's those people that would say, well, you know what? I wish he'd killed him. No. That's not who we are. We are not him. We did our job. I'm incredibly proud of the men and women who go out there every day and put their life on the line.
The 4 shootings, which began with a routine check of a vehicle in a motel parking lot, sparked a massive manhunt. A woman was also taken into custody, but it's not clear if she is still viewed as a suspect. Meanwhile, a town in the U.S. state of Washington is in shock after 2 students died in a high school shooting. Witnesses say student Jalen Freiberg walked into the school cafeteria on Friday morning and opened fire, killing a classmate and injuring 4 others before turning the gun on himself. 3 of the victims, which include 2 of Freiberg's cousins, are in critical condition with head injuries. Students say the gunman stared at his victims as he shot them. Freiberg was a member of a prominent family and was recently crowned homecoming prince. One student said Freiberg had a fight with another boy over a girl.
And still ahead in our news tonight. A proposal to raise the minimum wage to $32.50 an hour. The first local case of dengue fever this year. And a fiery car collision in Chengguano.